Introduction of Global City. What is Global City? Global City, an urban center that enjoys significant competitive advantages and that serves as a hub within a globalized economic system. The term has its origins in research on cities carried out during the 1980s, which examined the common characteristics of the world's most important cities. However, with increased attention being paid to processes of globalization during subsequent years, these world cities came to be known as global cities. Linked with the globalization was the idea of spatial reorganization and the hypothesis that cities were becoming key loci within global networks of production, finance, and telecommunications. In some formulations of the global city thesis, then, such cities are seen as the building blocks of globalization. Simultaneously, these cities were becoming newly privileged sites of local politics within the context of a broader project to reconfigure state institutions. A global city, also called a power city, world city, alpha city or world center, is a city which is a primary node in the global economic network. The concept comes from geography and urban studies, and the idea that globalization is created and furthered in strategic geographic locales according to a hierarchy of importance to the operation of the global system of finance and trade. Global City. World trading advantages. Global trade allows for specialization and lower costs to consumers. Countries can focus on what they are best suited to do, engage in activities with the lowest opportunity costs for them. Focusing on their comparative advantages means they can maximize production and efficiency, which leads to greater potential for profit and economic growth. Global trade can create economic wealth on a global scale as each country maximizes its revenue and growth by focusing on what it does best and saving money on imports that would be more costly for it to produce domestically. A country generates revenue from exporting the excess goods and services that its domestic market doesn't need to other countries that have a different comparative advantage. The money it receives from the exports can then be used to import goods and services it does not produce from the countries that have a comparative advantage in the production of those goods and services, just like England and Portugal trading wine and wheat but on a global scale with countless products and services. Disadvantages of international, global trade. Over-dependent countries or companies involved in the foreign trade are vulnerable to global events. An unfavorable event may impact the demand of the product, and could even lead to job losses. For instance, the recent US-China trade war is adversely affecting the Chinese export industry. Unfair to new companies or startups who don't have much resources and experience may find it difficult to compete against the big foreign firms. A threat to national security. If a country is over-dependent on the imports for strategic industries, then exporters may force it to take a decision that may not be in the national interest. Pressure on natural resources. A country only has limited natural resources. But, if it opens its doors to the foreign companies, it could drain those natural resources much quicker. Throughout history, people have migrated to large urban centers in search of opportunities. In forthcoming years, economic reasons will continue to drive this kind of migration. The megalopolises will capture a high percentage of the world's wealth and their enormous potential will attract thousands of people. Dan Hornweg, a professor at the Ontario University and author of the study Population Predictions for the World's Largest Cities in the 21st Century with Kevin Pope, warns of a possible exception. The fear is that African cities will increase their population without a proportional growth of their economy. And this would be a risk to the quality of life of its inhabitants.
Global City plays a big role in the world and can affect the issues in global, including the global outlook. Global City is not only focused on economic but also depends on how the government leads its place, how the military serves its constituents, and how they adopt the root of global economy. Every country have its own class or classes based on economy. It shows that there are different opportunities offered between each classes and it can bring changes in geography, culture, and language. Then, every cities merong kakayahan na makapag-influence even its small changes.
Importance of global cities. Global cities play an increasingly important role at the global and regional level. From Asia to Africa, from South and North America to Europe, large urban centers enjoy significant competitive advantages and serve as primary nodes in the globalized economic system. They interact with states and other international actors, pursue objectives that are often intertwined with the global economic agendas, and are crucial to questions related to climate change, mobility and migration, technological innovation, economic development and infrastructure. They bring economies of scale, develop markets, create jobs and encourage new economic activities to flourish. As economies move from primary activities such as farming, fishing and mining to industrial production and then on to services, the role of cities in the global economy increases with each transition. Impact of global cities in our environment. Megacity impacts on air quality and climate. As already discussed, large agglomerations of human population and production facilities can have a number of severe impacts on the environment. Arguably the most important and most far-reaching impact of megacities is on the atmospheric environment. For this reason, and for the sake of manageability, this paper will limit its discussion to the impact of megacities on atmospheric composition and climate. The first section will present a brief overview over existing research. In the following three sections, emissions from megacities and the impacts of megacities on atmospheric composition and on climate will be discussed separately.
Examples of global cities. So the examples of global cities are London, New York, Los Angeles, Paris, San Francisco, Rome, Tokyo, and many more. These places can be considered as a global cities because it has wealth, power, and can influence other countries as well as host the largest capital markets or events. For example, the New York City. New York City is home of the United Nations headquarters complex. These cities are the most well-known global cities as it provides global competitiveness for its citizens and companies. London, New York City, Paris, and Tokyo have been traditionally considered the Big Four. They also serve as symbols of global capitalism. One of the characteristics of a global city is to have an advanced transportation system. These global cities has international financial institutions, law firms, corporate headquarters, and stock exchange that have influence over the world economy.
Here are some of the world's megacities. Tokyo 37.39 million, Delhi 30.29 million, Shanghai 27.05 million, Sao Paulo 22.04 million, Ciudad de Mexico, Mexico City 21.78 million, Dhaka 21 million, Al-Qahira Cairo 20.9 million, Beijing 20.46 million,